Hello and welcome back to OddsNow for the first edition of our brand new Premier League betting show, which is going to be running every Thursday, giving you a heads up, a quick fire heads up to the action happening this weekend in England's top flight. Brad Walker joins me, Matt Hill, and we're going to be here, as I say, every week, just quickly running through all the games and trying to give you the heads up on where the value may be coming into the weekend. Now, bear in mind, things can change between a Thursday and a Saturday or Sunday or whenever the game is taking place. We actually have games across 4 nights this weekend, so plenty of football to get stuck into. Brad, before we dive into that first game, how are you doing and how excited are you for the new season?
I'm good, Matt. Yeah, very, very excited. I mean, I can't say we've been starved of football too much, have we, with the Euros, Copa America, and then the Olympics. But of course, it's always nice.
Overfed, if anything.
Exactly. Yeah, it's complete opposite. But it's always nice to have it back on a week-by-week basis, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I've been overfed all my life, as you could tell. So we'll, nothing strange there. I can't wait for some more football to dive into. And talking of diving in, we will dive in with the first game, Manchester United versus Fulham on Friday night. I'm going to take care of this one, and I think Manchester United. I presume everybody's as shocked as me to see 𝐒𝐿𝐴 is still in the building, but he is. As I said in my written preview of this game, I'm sure Eric himself was probably a little bit surprised, but nonetheless, they've decided to give him another chance. I worry about how long he'll be given if things don't start well, because there was a lot of rumblings of replacements over the summer. Thomas Tuchel was strongly linked with the job. Nothing came of that, but it does feel like a do or die season for Ten Hag and United. He's been quite well backed in the transfer market, although some of those new players are injured already. Respect. I think it's all going to hinge on those new signings for Manchester United this season, how quickly they can adapt and whether they can lift the team, and also whether they can have a little bit better luck with injuries. They lost some key players for long periods last year. Lisandro Martinez springs to mind as someone who makes a massive difference when he's fit for them. Fulham, on the other hand, I think Marco Silva staying is a massive plus for them. The Saudi Pro League have been chasing him desperately for a couple of years now, but he's stayed put. I worry about 𝐿𝐴 leaving the club. I think he leaves a massive hole in that midfield. Great money that they made off him going to Bayern Munich. I think it was about 45, 50 million pounds, which is needs must these days with the profit and sustainability rules, but still they would have liked to have kept hold of him, I'm sure. Silva will have to find a way of plugging that gap. They've lost some other big characters, I suppose, in like Tim Ream, Willian, but I still think there's enough quality in there for them to finish mid-table this year quite comfortably. In terms of this particular game, I've found an angle in. I want to go with the Fulham corners line. The reason for this is these two teams played each other 3 times last year. They also met in an FA Cup quarter-final, which you might remember Fulham got a controversial red card, which kind of swung the game. But yeah, they met 3 times, and across those 3 games, Fulham racked up 25 corners, which is a staggeringly high amount. 9, 9, and 7 across the 3 games. So with the 2 managers being the same, I'm expecting a similar style of play. Fulham obviously get a bit of joy playing against this United side on the transition, similar to how sides like Crystal Palace did last season. So I see no reason why they won't have more corners again this time around. Fulham over 5.5 corners is 6-4, which I thought was really, really good value given the least they got in 3 attempts last year was 7. So that's my bet in the season opener. I'm going to hand over to Brad for Ipswich versus Liverpool with a disclaimer that Brad is a Liverpool fan. So Brad, please don't be too biased with this summary.
I'll try my best, Matt. I'll try my best. We know that it's going to be Ipswich's first Premier League match in 22 years following their promotion last season.
Good to have them back. Good to have them back, I'd say.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, it's Liverpool's first competitive game under Arne Slot after 𝐿𝐴 left last season as well at the end. There's going to be a party atmosphere at Portman Road, I'm sure, although they have been given, say, a difficult start. I don't think it could have been given any harder start with Liverpool and Manchester City in their first 2 games, Ipswich, but they have been phenomenal since Kieran McKenna's appointment in 2021, of course, securing back-to-back promotions, now back in the Premier League. They are odds on to get relegated at the minute, but they do have quality in their team. Leif Davis at left back, 18 assists last season in the Championship, which is a phenomenal return. Omari Hutchinson as well as signed permanently now from Chelsea after a successful loan spell with the club last season. I think that's a great great deal for them if they want to secure their Premier League status beyond this season. The man to watch in this game for them, in my opinion, there will be attacking midfielder Conor Chaplin. I think he had more shots on target than any other Ipswich player last season with 40. He'll be looking to exploit the uncertainty, I think, in Liverpool's defensive midfield. They're still looking for a permanent solution in that number 6 role, aren't they? We've recently had a move for Martin Zubimendi collapse. We've been looking for someone in that position now, Liverpool, for 2 or 3 years after Fabinho's form dropped off a cliff a couple of years ago. Wataru Endo did well last season in his first season at the club, but it doesn't seem as he's too fancied by Slot based off what we've seen pre-season. Ryan Gravenberch has been playing there the last couple of friendlies. He started against Sevilla last weekend at Anfield, but he's been far from convincing since joining Liverpool, and that's why I do think Ipswich will be looking to exploit that uncertainty in that area of the pitch. And Chaplin, I've mentioned how many shots he had on target for Ipswich last season. He's comes in at 7-1 to have 1.5 plus shots on target in this one with Bet365, which I was really surprised about. I think there's plenty of value on offering that one. I think Ipswich, their first home game in the league, like we said now for over 2 decades, they'll be looking for a fast start here against, of course, they'll be unfancied against Liverpool, but I think there's plenty of value in that back there. And another one, a little side bet as well, 𝐿𝐽𝐻�10, he's likely to start for Liverpool. Struggled with fitness at times at Anfield since signing for them, but he's got a positive scoring ratio when he does play. He averaged a goal every 116 minutes last season in the Premier League, scored 10 despite having numerous injury problems, and he scored a fantastic volley versus Sevilla last weekend. So you can get him to score anytime at 8-5 with Paddy Power, but I'll particularly be focusing on that Chaplin bet, 1.5 plus shots on target at 7-1. That would be my bet to watch in this one.
Okay, putting up an Ipswich player, surprising. Good. Don't think we can accuse you of any bias there, Brad, so fair play to you. Back to me then. For Arsenal versus Wolves, and I mean, I've seen everybody putting Arsenal up as the best bet to win the Premier League, so what could possibly go wrong? If I was an Arsenal fan, that would terrify me, because you just want to be going under the radar, don't you, really? And let's be honest, they are taking on a Manchester City side that are a once-in-a-lifetime level of dominance here. They're setting new records for winning consecutive titles. They're going for a 5th straight title. There were chinks in their armour last season, and Arsenal did their very best to exploit them, but ultimately they did still come up short. So are they in a position to go one better this season? Well, most importantly, they're not losing any of their key players, are they? You know, you look at this squad, and the main thing you want to do is keep it together, which Mikel Arteta is managing to do. And he's also added to it with Calafiori at the back, which potentially solves their left back problem. And I'm hesitant to say problem, but I think if you were picking out a weak area in that Arsenal team last season, it probably was at left back. So he comes with great pedigree, the Bologna defender, also an Italian international. So spirits are high in the camp at the Emirates. They had a fantastic home record there last season as well, won 15 of their 19 games. They welcome a Wolves side who I would say have had quite a disruptive summer, not helped last week or earlier this week by losing Pedro Neto to Chelsea. That deal seemed to come out of absolutely nowhere, but I'm never that surprised when Chelsea signed a player. To be honest, I probably need to get on Chelsea's transfers page after this video and just refresh it to check I haven't missed a new signing while we've been talking. But Neto is a massive gap and going to be a tough player for Gary O'Neill to replace. Wolves are in the business of replacing key players. They do have a high turnover of players. I think in players like Núñez that they've sold to big teams before, and they always seem to find a way. They've brought in yet more recruits from Portugal this summer. Time will tell whether they're up to the level. I think losing 𝐒𝐿 at the back is a massive blow for them. Captain, best defender, been there a long time, really understood the fabric of the club. He's going to be tough to replace, and they've kind of gambled with youngsters so far in terms of replacements. So it's an already shaky Wolves defence, and it could get shakier. So I'm a bit worried for Wolves at the moment, but when you've brought in £90 million worth of fees on 2 sales, you would expect players to come in before the window ends. But we have to assess them as of right now. And I'm worried about Wolves. I'm worried about this back line. Arsenal, for all the reasons I've said, are huge favourites to win this 1-5. You'll struggle to find a skinnier favourite this weekend. I'm going to back Arsenal, keep it simple, on the handicap, -2.5. So to win by 3 or more goals, I think this could be a bit of a pasting for Wolves and Gary O'Neill. And that comes in at 6-4. So yeah, Arsenal for me. We're going to go to Everton versus Brighton next with Brad. Brad, last season at Goodison Park for the Toffees.
Yeah, it's an intriguing game. I think it's difficult to predict an outcome. I don't think any outcome would really be a massive shock, and that's why I'm going to be staying away from that particular betting line. Everton, you said it's their last season at Goodison Park. They'll be hoping for a less eventful experience, I think, this time around, at least off the pitch, following the 2 separate points deductions that they had last season. But there were plenty of positive signs on the pitch for them and 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐴. They would have finished 12th if not for those points docked. I think they've been only a point or two away from the top half finish as well, and they comfortably avoided relegation last season after flirting with dropping down to the Championship, let's say, in the previous 2 campaigns. Brighton, meanwhile, they endured a difficult second half of last season, didn't they? We saw manager Roberto De Zerbi leave at the end of the season. He's been replaced by German manager Fabian Hürzeler, who is the youngest permanent manager in Premier League history. He's just 31 years old. He's younger than several members of the Brighton squad he'll be overseeing this season. But I did have a positive pre-season under him, most recently winning 4-0 at home to Villarreal. Very positive going forward. I think a little susceptible, at the back. Conceded a fair amount of chances, but they're going to make for an exciting watch. That's certainly for sure this season. They've got impressive attacking options. João Pedro, brilliant last season. Danny Welbeck. Jorginho Rutter looks like he could be coming in from Leeds after they have triggered his release clause earlier today. But one man to watch in particular for me is 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐴. He's the winger that they signed from Newcastle for £35 million. He's just 20 years old. He impressed on loan at Feyenoord last season under Arne Slot. And scored 10 goals and 6 assists in the got 10 goals and 6 assists in Eredivisie. He hit the ground running in pre-season. He scored 3 times, including the goal and assist versus Villarreal last weekend in that impressive win. I think he's a very exciting young player who could be one of the signings of the season come the end of the season, and based on what we've seen from him so far in a Brighton shirt. And he comes in, I was pretty surprised at this one as well, an anytime goal scorer at 4-1 with Sky Bet. Like I said, based on what we've seen from him so far in Brighton and last year over in Holland, I think certainly plenty of value in that one, backing him to get his name on the score sheet at Goodison. Another little side bet. Won't be putting too much on this, but I think it's worth a mention. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, he looked like he refound some of his positive form at the end of last season. Of course, that header against Liverpool in the Merseyside derby springs to mind. He comes in at 9-4 with Bet365 to have 1.5 plus shots on target. Everton are at home. You'd back them to create chances. He'll be at the focal point of anything they do. I think that could be worth a look at as well. My main bet will be Minter scoring any time at 4-1 for Brighton, on Merseyside this weekend.
Yeah, I like that one. He's had a fantastic pre-season, and a lot of people won't have seen this young lad play and would have been surprised at the fee, I think, that Newcastle received for him. But yeah, could be definitely one to watch. I'm excited to see how he fares. We move on to Newcastle next. They're at home to Southampton. Newcastle's home record traditionally fantastic, especially against these kind of teams. But looking at their summer, another team who've had quite a disrupted summer, both on and off the pitch, I would say. Eddie Howe, strongly linked with the England managerial role after Gareth Southgate announced he'd be stepping away from the Three Lions. And he took a little bit of time to actually publicly distance himself for it. He was kind of non-dismissive in his initial contacts, but I think since he's kind of said I'm committed to the club, etc., I'd still be interested to see how he would play it if he was actually offered the role, because I find it hard to believe any young ambitious England manager can turn that job down. Disruption in the boardroom as well. Amanda Staveley and her husband, co-owners of the club, announced they would be stepping away last month. So a little bit of a reshuffle there. Does that weaken Howe's hand? They were big allies of Eddie Howe as well, so that could play into his thinking in terms of his future. But if we look at the here and now, they were in the Champions League last season. Fantastic achievement to qualify. They made a real good effort of it in the group of death, I suppose. I was lucky enough to be at their game against Dortmund, and they weren't outplayed. They obviously had a memorable night against PSG as well. So they'll have enjoyed that experience, but ultimately it did impact their league form, as we see so many times with teams that get into Europe for the first time in a while. And I think being out of Europe entirely is a massive plus for this Newcastle side this season. As you mentioned, with the sale of Minter to Brighton, they have to balance the books for PSR, but they've managed to do it without losing one of their kind of first team players. So there's not a lot of disruption to that starting 11. So I'm fairly confident about how Newcastle are going to go this season. I think they've maybe been a little bit overlooked in the market so far. We shall see. Southampton coming back up into the Championship. obviously a regular in the Premier League over the last decade, but new management, new style under Russell Martin. And I think it's fair to say that Martin is not the kind of guy that's going to compromise his style of play just because his team have come up into a new division. He plays very possession-heavy, attacking football, and that could have been to their detriment last season because despite scoring 80-plus goals in the Championship, they conceded a whopping 63. And that actually puts them in the bottom half of the Championship last season in terms of the quality of their defence. For a bit of context, Birmingham were relegated from the Championship conceding 65. So it really was playing with fire, entertaining stuff, no doubt. But my worry would be we saw Burnley fail to sacrifice their playing style under Vincent Kompany last season with devastating results. Obviously, is Martin going to be a little bit savvier? What's he going to do when his team can only have 30% of the ball at a place like Man City or Liverpool? They come here to Newcastle. Newcastle might not dominate the ball, but they do dominate proceedings generally at St James's Park. Really find it hard to oppose them, to be honest, but they're so short in the win market and in the goal scoring markets that I've decided to focus on a player prop, and Alexander Isak, who for my money is one of the best strikers in the Premier League, possibly the second best to Erling Haaland. I think he's destined for the very, very top. Just needs to have a run of clear fitness. Has it been hampered a little bit by injuries in the last couple of years, but when he's fit and firing, he's virtually unplayable. I can't see how this Southampton backline shuts him out. And at 5-6 to score any time, Isak looks a really, really solid player. One of my best bets of the weekend, that one. Brad, over to you for Nottingham Forest versus Bournemouth.
Yes, another difficult one to call. Sorry, Matt. Forest, of course, will have been happy to avoid relegation last season, particularly after they too had points taken off them for PSR breaches. Nuno Espirito Santo came in replacing Steve Cooper in December. He did well to navigate a route to safety last year, given the circumstances with the points deduction. They have got quality in their side, Nottingham Forest. Morgan Gibbs-White, Chris Wood scored lots of goals from last year. Anthony Elanga, and Callum Hudson-Odoi as well on the wing. But I just got a feeling about this Forest side that they will be among those teams battling relegation once again. They are odds against going in at the time of recording. But yeah, I'm not convinced by them based on what we've seen last year and based on what they've done in the transfer market as well. I actually think Nuno Espirito Santo could be out of a job at some point this season if they don't kick on fast based on last season. There's been some questionable decision making, hasn't there, at Forest overall since they've returned to the Premier League in terms of players coming in, the amounts of players coming in, etc. Weird press releases getting put out at times last season regarding officials. But switching on to Bournemouth anyway, they enjoyed a brilliant first season in contrast under Andoni Iraola. I think they were 1 point away from a top half finish last season, but they have lost their talisman in Dominic Solanke now. He's gone to Tottenham for £65 million. It's a major, major blow for them going forward. He scored 21 goals from last season. It's hard to see where else their goals come from. Justin Kluivert and Antoine Semenyo, they to be fair, they chipped in with a few between them last season. But they will need to step up alongside the likes of Luis Sinisterra and Enis Ünal, who I think has been signed permanently after a loan deal last year. He only scored twice last season, the Turkish striker. He's definitely going to have to step up more, even though he is injured this weekend, as is Tyler Adams, of course, who's been blighted by injury since he signed with Bournemouth last summer. A couple of weeks ago, I would have snatched a hand off at Bournemouth, a Bournemouth win, coming in at just over 2-1. But now with the loss of Solanke, I'm not as convinced, particularly with it being at the City ground. Forest, I don't think they made the most of their home fixtures last season, but it is still a difficult place to go when that crowd gets going. Based on all that, I'm not going to put a bet up for this one. I'm just not sure about how this one can go now with the loss of Solanke plus a couple of injuries for Bournemouth. I wouldn't be surprised by any outcome, so I wouldn't really want to put any money down for this one. Yeah.
I like that. No bet. We're all about the no bet here. If you don't force the bet if there isn't one there, and definitely a watching brief for Bournemouth, a Solanke-less Bournemouth. I think there are players there that could step into his shoes, but we need to see who that's going to be first before we get too confident about them. West Ham, Aston Villa next for me. Then this is the late kickoff. Could be a great game to watch, couldn't it? This one, two sides that will be very excited about the season ahead for differing reasons. West Ham under new management, of course. Well, I think they'd reached the end of their natural time under David Moyes. West Ham had a fantastic time under the Scot, of course, winning a continental title in the Conference League. Memories that those fans will just quite simply never forget. But ultimately, there was a lot of frustration in East London about the style of football, whether Moyes was getting the best out of this squad. Yet he consistently pointed to his record, which was consistent top half finishes, performing in Europe, Europa League semi-final to go with the Conference League win. So I think it was the right time for everyone to part. Very interested to see how this appointment goes. Julian Lopetegui, we all know he's got a pedigree, former manager of Real Madrid, Sevilla, Spanish national team, had a good spell at Wolves before walking out on his own accord because of boardroom disagreements. Wolves fans are fairly split on him, I think it's fair to say. Impressed with the impact he went in when they were bottom of the league and really turned them round. But I think his style of football could potentially be a problem in the long term for West Ham fans who are thinking if they're expecting some free-flowing attacking football to come into their team, they might be a bit disappointed. He's very possession-orientated and patient build-up. And I just don't know how that's going to quite sit with the West Ham fans. But to be honest, if you're winning, fans are generally happy, and he is proven to be an effective manager. They've had some really emphatic transfer business this year. I already mentioned Max Kilman coming in from Wolves, Crescencio Somerville from Leeds, an extremely exciting player. I cannot wait to see how Nicholas Füllkrug adapts to life in the Premier League, a battering ram of a striker that we saw excel at the Euros for Germany and was playing in the Champions League final for Borussia Dortmund a few months ago. So that looks like a real coup for them as well. Aston Villa are very excited about this season for different reasons. They are in the Champions League after many, many years away. Unai Emery worked miracles at Villa Park last season. He had them playing in such a fantastic way as well. Really good, exciting brand of football. Proving a lot of people wrong who doubted him during his time at Arsenal. Was really pleased for him to come back into English football and have such a successful impact. There's no reason why they can't carry this on. They have had a couple of big departures, I think it's fair to say. Douglas Luiz looks a real blow, but Juventus swooping for him for around 50 million. Moussa Diaby going over to Saudi Arabia in a 60 million pound deal. But what that has meant is that they've had money to reinvest. They've moved to replace Luiz with Onana from Everton, who looks a really savvy pickup as well. Ian Maatsen is a fullback on the rise as well. And then they've beefed out their squad with players like Cameron Archer and Jadon Philogene, former youth products of Villa, who they've re-signed after good spells away from the club. So the real challenge for Villa this season is going to be managing that squad, isn't it, as they play a hectic schedule. The Champions League, of course, all teams are playing an additional 2 group stage fixtures. So what is already a big strain on a squad is going to be an even bigger strain on a squad this time around. That's going to test them in the Premier League. We saw Newcastle really struggle with that balance last season. And I just think because of the feel-good factor around West Ham, because of the signings they've made, because of the new management, I actually want to be with West Ham here at the prices. I think there's a little bit of 8 to 5 available, but 6 to 4. They are on the drift, West Ham. So if you are going to back them, I would suggest just holding off, let that price get a little bit bigger. Money's coming for Villa, presumably because of how well they did last season. But one caveat I will just throw in as well. Aston Villa's record at West Ham is absolutely abysmal. I think they've won 2 of their last 16 visits to West Ham. So the 2 of the last 16 head-to-head, and they haven't won at West Ham since 2011. So it's one of those weird bogey teams. I'm sure everybody's team has won. And I was speaking to a Villa fan at the weekend who said to me, we never, ever win at West Ham. So that sealed the deal for me. West Ham the pick at 6 to 4. We've got 3 games to go. Brad, over to you for Sunday's opener between Brentford and Crystal Palace.
Yeah, we'll start off with the home side, Matt. Brentford. They flirted with the prospect of relegation at times last season, didn't they? But they eventually pulled away to survive in relatively comfortable fashion. They'll be hoping to kick on this season, I'm sure, and push up towards that mid-table range. But I'm not entirely sure it will be as comfortable as they hope. Ivan Toney, who I think we can all agree is probably their best player, their key man up top, could still leave. He's been linked with Man United. Their striker, 𝐒𝐿𝐴, who they signed this summer, it looks as though almost a preemptive Toney replacement, is now injured until Christmas, I think. So that's a hammer blow for them. Bryan Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa, they did step up in Toney's absence last season. They combined for 21 goals in the Premier League. That will be needed again, particularly if he does leave Toney. I do like the signing of Fabio Carvalho from Liverpool. He comes in for £27.5 million. It's a big price, a big price tag, but he does have a high ceiling. He's regained some form, on loan at Hull in the second half of last season after a bit of a stagnant spell Didn't quite work out for him at Liverpool, unfortunately, but you can see the potential that he's got there. I think that could be a good move for him. They'll also be looking, Brentford, for much better luck on the injury front as well. They had a very long injury list last season, particularly in defensive areas. They struggled at times with that, and I'm sure that played a factor in their, let's say, stumbling form during the last campaign. But I do still think it could be a tough season, particularly if Tony was to depart. Their home form wasn't convincing either last season, which will need to improve. They lost 7 of their home fixtures and conceded 2 or more goals in 11 of their home games, which again, it's just not good enough. They'll be looking to improve on that if they're to enjoy a better season this time around. Crystal Palace, on the other hand, enjoyed a remarkable resurgence since Oliver Glasner's appointment in February. I think there were initial fears that they could get dragged into a relegation scrap given the form they showed under Roy Hodgson in the first half of the season. He, of course, steps down and Glasner comes in, and they eventually finished 10th, which I think is their highest Premier League finish since 2014-15. So optimism's high at Selhurst Park, but several key figures could still depart. Ħ𝐿𝐸's already gone to Michael Ħ𝐿𝐸, that is, has already gone to Bayern Munich. Mark Gay looks as though he could be set for a move to Newcastle. Joachim Andersen's being touted for a return to Fulham, which is a strange one. I don't know why you'd go there. It's a sideways step for me. I'd just stay at Palace based on what we saw in the second half of last season. But 𝐿𝐸 as well continues to be linked with a move away to Spurs and Arsenal, although I do, push comes to shove right now, I'd expect him probably to stay for another season. Expectations are high, like I said, overall. Jean-Philippe Mateta scored 19 goals last season. I think 13 of them might have been after Glasner's appointment, which shows that he really hit the ground running under the Austrian manager. He also impressed, didn't he, for France at the Olympics, grabbed a couple of goals as they picked up silver. They look to be a side on the up, Palace. I think there's still questions around this Brentford team. I'm not quite convinced by them yet, and that's why I'll be going for Crystal Palace to win this one. Comes in at 15-8, generally, to get their season off up and running. What looked on paper to be a difficult away fixture, but like I said, I'm not sure Brentford are quite convincing at home, as some people might think. So I'm going to go with Crystal Palace to pick up their first 3 points here, 15-8 generally.
Lovely stuff. Crystal Palace to win at Brentford for Brad. Then my last game is the Super Sunday showdown between Chelsea and Manchester City. The TV schedulers knew what they were doing when they picked this one out. Then there should be a very intriguing watch. I don't really know how to play it, so spoiler alert, this is a no-bet game for me, unfortunately. I'm sure you'll find plenty of people suggesting various bets for this game elsewhere, but I'll give you my reasoning for why that is. I just think there's so much uncertainty around these two teams early in the season. There's always uncertainty around Chelsea, isn't there? Oh, there certainly was last term. God, didn't know what you were going to get from day to day at Stamford Bridge. There was carnage off the pitch, on the pitch, some brilliant performances and some dreadful performances as well. And Mauricio Pochettino, despite seeming to finally get on top of this squad, was axed unceremoniously at the end of the season. In comes Enzo Maresca, which is a very interesting appointment. Won the championship at a canter with Leicester, but it's a hell of a step up, isn't it, from managing in the championship to managing a team that expectations will be minimum top 4 finish, you would think, with this squad. And really, if you actually break down the squad man for man, this squad should be challenging for the title. The money they've spent and the quality they have in the ranks, but it just seems such a mishmash of players and there's no kind of continuity. And yet they decide to chop and change again. So I found that all very bizarre. I'm sure a lot of people did. But one thing you can't question with Todd Boehly is he knows how to find loopholes, and they continue to spend outrageously despite having seemingly been hemorrhaging money for the last 2 seasons. In comes Pedro Neto, who we already discussed. That looks a brilliant pickup, doesn't it, from Wolves? He always so impressive. Maresca's brought his own man with him in 𝐿𝐸𝐸, who comes in from Leicester. And there's a few more signings still to follow if you believe what you read. I like the pickup of Tosin Adarabioyo on a free as well from Fulham. Thought he was really impressive last season. Credit to them, they managed to generate £80 million from the sales of Ian Maatsen, Lewis Hall and Amari Hutchinson. So people will wonder how Chelsea balance the books, but it is often stuff like that, just selling players that you almost forgot they had in their ranks. Cole Palmer had an unbelievable season for the Blues last year, arguably the player of the season for me in the Premier League. Can he back that up? I think he probably can. Very much a confidence player, and his confidence should be sky high. He comes off the back of scoring in the European Championship final as well for England, of course, in that 2-1 loss to Spain. So the reasons to think Chelsea will go well this season, then you can add in the likes of Christopher Nkunku, who missed a huge chunk of last season through injury. He's back fit and firing. He should be playing just behind the striker. So a lot of intrigue around Chelsea. Man City, we know what we get, don't we? They've won the title 4 years in a row. Everybody's writing them off, but really quite difficult to pick holes, too many holes in their armour. They have lost some big players over the summer, big characters, I would say. But one word of warning that I would have for overly optimistic Arsenal fans, and not to go off piece here, but I really worry about Arsenal if they were to lose Martin Odegaard to injury this season. I think he's the heartbeat of their team. Let's not forget, Manchester City for the last 2 seasons have lost Kevin De Bruyne for long periods of the season, and yet have still managed to find a way to win the title. And that is the key with this City squad, isn't it? It's just the depth and the dearth of quality that they have in their ranks. As we usually do with City in these early pre-season games and the Community Shield, we've seen their youngsters filling in gaps while senior players have a little bit more recovery time. Oscar Bob, we've just heard, is out for a long period, which is a shame. I think he was a player that was maybe going to have a bit of a breakthrough season for City, so that is a blow for them. But let's not mess around. When City get their full team out, they're going to be very, very tough for anybody to stop. I always think they are quite slow starters in the Premier League. They're a chasing horse, aren't they? They like to come from behind and finish with a wet sail. So I don't really like to get crazy backing them in the first few weeks. But equally, I don't have any faith to back Chelsea in this game. So I'm just going to sit back, probably with a cold beverage, if my family will allow me, and enjoy this one. It's a no bet from me. Last game of the weekend comes from Leicester, newly promoted Leicester, hosting Tottenham. Brad, talk us through that one.
Yeah, coming into the new season, it already feels as though there's a bit of a dark cloud hanging over Leicester. There's an impending point deduction looming. It could be a hefty one too, if you believe some of the reports which are coming out. They've had some difficult results in pre-season. They won 1 of their 4 games, failed to score in 3. And recently, in their most recent match, they lost 3-0 to Lens in their final friendly ahead of the new Premier League season. And there's already a lot of negativity online among the Leicester fan base surrounding manager Steve Cooper. I suspect his history with Nottingham Forest probably won't help matters there and won't be doing him any favours. I actually tipped him in a piece on OddsNow.com to be the first manager to leave their post this season. It's actually between him and Enzo Maresca, in my mind, who you just spoken about there, of course, is the former Leicester manager before he moved to Chelsea. They also lost their best player, as you mentioned, in Dewsbury Hall, who followed Maresca to Stamford Bridge. They have made some positive signings. I think the permanent signing of Abdul Fatawu, who did well for them last season, is a plus. Decordova Reid, of course, from Fulham, comes in on a free. I think he brings some much-needed Premier League experience to this squad, but they have looked very poor in pre-season. And like I said, there's a lot of negativity around that club. And on the other hand, you've got a Tottenham side visiting the King Power, who showed a lot of positive signs, I think, in their first season last year under 𝐿𝐴𝐵. They did miss out on Champions League football, but they've signed well. I think the signing of Archie Gray looks a brilliant one for the future. And Dominic Solanke, for me, there's a lot of talk about his price tag. Comes in for £65 million, but I think he'll be one of the signings of the season. I really do. I know I said that about the young Brighton fellow who's Minter. That's it. His name escaped me there for a second. But
you're allowed to. I'll let you.
I had a bit of a blank moment there, but I do think the value he'll bring to this Spurs team will justify that. He'll get plenty of chances with Postecoglou's style. Scored 21 goals for Bournemouth last season. If he's doing that for Bournemouth, I certainly think he can at least match that for Tottenham this year. And a lot of talk around Tottenham. They're being very, very dismissed this season, but I'm actually going to back them to, again, like you said, I don't want to go off piece, but I think they will get in the top 4 this year. I like the manager and Postecoglou, and I think his goals could be the difference if they can tighten up a little bit at the back. But even with what was a suspect defence last season, let's say, I can't see them having too much trouble against Leicester. I think they score a bag load here with their attacking style against a very, very poor Leicester side and pile the pressure on Steve Cooper early on this season. I'm sure Tottenham will fancy their chances of winning and winning well. And so having said all that, I'm going to go with Tottenham to score over 2.5 plus goals. That comes in at 13-8 generally. I think there's plenty of value there against, like I said, a pretty poor Leicester side.
Okay, then, yeah. So I was hoping we were going to get through these games in half an hour. 33 minutes, not too bad a first effort, I would say. That's always going to be our aim every week, to do the 10 games in half an hour, fly through them, but also give you all the information you need to attack the weekend in a betting sense. So let's just round up the best bets then. Mine are on the screen there now. I've got Fulham over 5.5 corners at Old Trafford on Friday night. Arsenal to smash Wolves, win by 3 or more goals at 6-4. 𝐒𝐴TZ𝐸 anytime against shaky Southampton backline at 5-6, and West Ham to get the better of Aston Villa, but they are on the drift, so maybe just hold for a better price there if you do want to back the Hammers. I would say my most confident bet of those would be the 𝐒𝐴TZ𝐸 anytime. I just can't. If he plays and if he's fit, I think he causes chaos for that Southampton defence. Brad, just to get your best bets up on screen, mate, which would you say is your best bet of those?
I've got a Tottenham one. I think Leicester, they're going to have a poor season this year, especially with the points deduction. They're not convinced, like I said, over the summer. I wouldn't be surprised if they finish bottom of the Premier League, to be honest with you. And I think Tottenham have got goals in them, especially with 𝐒𝐴TZ𝐸 now. Yeah, I'll go with Tottenham to win well on Monday. I think that stands out of those four for me.
Okay, and just a little bonus one for you. Brad talking about Leicester and his worries for Steve Cooper. Steve Cooper is 12-1 to be the first Premier League manager to be sacked. Might want to get a little bit of that in the way Brad is talking. He's very confident with that one. But yeah, couldn't put you off myself. If you are still watching, thanks very much for watching. Let us know what you thought of the format. This is a trial, but we're going to be doing this weekly. Let us know what your best bets are for the first weekend of the Premier League, and anyone you're backing outright in the anti-post market as well. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter, OddsNow with 2 underscores, and you can head over to our TikTok as well, where we try and do some short form video format on the football and on all sports betting content. So thanks for watching. Give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you very soon.